I'm very excited to bring you today a conversation among what we're calling Catholic insiders. It's a group of LGBT Catholics and former Catholics who want to unpack our experiences of harm, complexity, nuance, and also hope, both in and outside of the church. These are people who are and have been true believers, insiders, people with degrees in theology, graduate degrees in Catholic studies, people who've attended traditional Latin masses, who loved them as I did, people who really wanted to be faithful Catholics, and some who still do. We want to bring together a conversation across all of these differences, hoping that it can offer something to the church as we think about what we want to do as we go forward, and also to help people process experiences of harm and complexity. We want to know what's it like on the ground right now, and how have different people processed their experiences in the church in different ways, especially LGBTQ+ people. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Chris Damian. I'm a gay Catholic lawyer and writer who's been exploring these questions for well over a decade. One of the things that I want you to know for this conversation is that we're going to discuss some hard topics. We're going to be talking about things like purity culture, suicide, religious and other trauma. And so if at any point you need to take a break during this conversation, please feel very empowered to do so. Also note that this conversation is going to be shared in 3 parts. So with that, I'm very excited to bring you part 1 today. Let's begin. Hello, welcome. We are inserting you into a conversation that we've all been having over the weekend about the church, about LGBTQ spaces, politics, culture, society, and we just wanted to give you all an opportunity to just sit with us while we kind of pick up the conversation, continue it a little bit. So maybe to start off, I just want to go down the line and maybe have everyone describe how would you describe your current level of Catholicism? Maybe let's start with Justin.
Oh no. I'm Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's it? That's all we get?
I don't know how to answer this. Okay, so I like what we do need to scale on a scale of 1 to 10. But what's a 10?
Just pick a number.
I don't know. 6.
Okay.
I go to mass, but I also go to non-denominational church, but I also don't go to church sometimes.
That's a level.
Thank you for sharing. Don't affirm me in that moment. I would say it's a complicated question for me. I'm very much Catholic on my own terms. So historically, I appreciate the work that Max and I do in highlighting problematic histories and systems of power abuse in the church. So claiming being Catholic is complicated, but as someone raised within a deeply Polish Catholic community, I will always be culturally Catholic. It's something that I don't think I can untether myself from.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. I was like, which mic belongs to me? I would say that Catholicism is something that is very important to me still too, similar to Emma. When I came out as transgender, the Catholic world that I was in blew up. So I really had to deconstruct to reconstruct and create a whole new Catholic space with new Catholic friends and a progressive understanding of Catholic social teaching. So that's kind of where I am with Catholicism.
I guess I can answer this question too. Usually I'll say that I feel very settled in my faith and very unsettled in others, which I think feels right to me, also maybe feels very Catholic. I do identify as Catholic. I do practice Catholic, maybe not in the same way as I did when I was younger. I am really invested in the tradition of the church and in understanding our current context of the church within the broader context throughout history. So for me, the tradition has always been really important and also really interesting, but I have a very, I would say, evolving relationship to Catholicism.
Now onto the ex-Catholic side of the room.
Oh, wait, did we divide that way?
We did joke about sitting this way, and then everyone moved around so many times. This is where we landed. But yeah, my name's Veronica, and I would not typically, I call myself ex-Catholic, but I would say maybe a 3, because you can take me out of the church, but you can't take the Catholicism out of me. It's stuck in...
We went to a shrine on this trip, so just look at it. And then she's making relics the whole time, 3rd-class relics. She was going through the Jubilee door. It was we could not get her out of the church.
Yeah, we're the only ones here who went to this shrine, and I've been listening to worship music all weekend. So who's really Catholic here in this room? Anyway,
That's fair.
Yeah, I would say I am still definitely very culturally Catholic. And like, I think that's just going to be something for all of us forever. Like, that's just going to impact us. I would say I'm still a very spiritual person, and that Catholicism deeply influences my spirituality. But I would not consider myself a practicing Catholic.
I don't use the Catholic label, and for YouTube videos, I'll often say atheist, which pushes boundaries. I think creates space for people to deconstruct without sort of a taboo around it. I also get called the most Catholic non-Catholic out there. Whenever I'm hanging out with even my like LDS friends, I'll just quote scripture all the time, and they don't know what to do with that. Yeah, so I don't use kind of the atheist label, but still get invited to church from time to time, and with this sort of work, do a lot of very Catholic work, more than some Catholics out there.
Yeah, an author that I really like, I didn't know she was Catholic, but I went to a talk that she gave, and she was like, well, I'll just share with you all that I'm Catholic. I don't believe in God, but I still pray the rosary when I'm anxious. And so I think, Catholicism manifests itself in a lot of ways. And, we could have a whole conversation about that. But let's talk about sex. Or sexuality.
Not sign up.
JK, we're going to talk about our favorite topic, chastity. So, the Catechism says that chastity is a successful integration of sexuality within the person. And I'm really curious, I think we're all curious about the different messages related to integration. What does integration mean? How is it presented to Catholic youth? So maybe I'll open up with a question of, who here had integration as a concept that was presented to them and had some significance when they were a kid?
In a healthy way or an unhealthy?
In any way.
I know that's
And we'll unpack that.
healthy for me.
Yeah, let's unpack that. Maybe, Veronica, let's start with you. When you were a kid, what did chastity mean?
Sure.
Or
When I
integration?
was 12, I did Theology of the Body for Teens Middle School Edition by Christopher West and Jason Everett. It came with a workbook and videos. I did it with my homeschool friends. And that was mainly the big emphasis. They didn't talk a ton about the details of sex, but about the dignity of the human person and about how living chastely is about the integration of your dignity and worth and what it means to be a beloved son or daughter of God. And so chastity is the way to live an integrated life rather than letting your body completely take over your soul.
Yeah. And how did that manifest itself practically for you in your life? What did that mean for you at that stage of life?
Well, for me, I think I got a lot of the messaging about courting culture and don't date. Dating is for marriage, for a purpose. And I, from a young age, wanted to be a nun. So I grappled with I definitely do want to be a nun, but you're saying I'll never date ever. I'll never kiss anyone ever, because why would I go through that when I know I'm going to break up with them anyway? What is the point? That feels like cheating on God. So I shut down a ton of my sexuality my whole life, really till the end of college. So I really didn't get to know that side of myself at all until after, all of that, because the sexuality was specifically only for marriage, any sexuality at all, even when it comes to crushes or talking about somebody who's cute or something.
Yeah. Maybe we'll kind of start at this side of the table. So, Evelyn, Kate, what resonates with you?
I would say I don't think I actually really specifically heard about the term of integration, but I definitely heard a lot about chastity. And I would say I don't know, it was never that hard for me. I was I don't know why it's that hard to just not have sex with your boyfriend. It's I had a girl from my youth group who was sometimes it's just so hard, and I was girl, get it together. But
Some of us are just respectful.
some of us just
So
respect our brothers in Christ a little more than others. No, just lesbian. So I would say I didn't really get the messaging about integration specifically that concept until I was at Franciscan, and then really specifically when I was taking Christian marriage class in Austria as I was actively leaving the church. And I think for me it just really played an active role in my leaving the church, because I was just so much of my decision to take a step back from, at the time what I was saying was take a step back from the church, was that I could not distinguish whether I was actually, I've been telling myself I was bi, that was not seeming to play out in my lived experience with every man that I was dating. And I was I think that I just need to be able to be honest with myself about this, and I don't feel like I can actually figure this out within the context of the church. Then I kissed one girl, and now I'm marrying her, so oops. But
Very traditional values.
very traditional lesbian values over here.
Better than most Catholics.
Exactly.
Truly.
Yeah, so I would say like integration played a huge role in just me realizing that integration was not going to be possible for me within the framework that was laid out for me.
Yeah. One of the things I find really interesting is the ways in which kind of integration, chastity messages in the church can do a lot to kind of get you to not read your own experiences.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. Kate, what about you?
I realized that I was gay before I became super Catholic, and so my barrier to becoming Catholic, and then the thing that made me super Catholic, was sort of the Theology of the Body, Christopher West, all of these names. And the big thing was like, you're not your identity, or you're not your experience. You are a beloved son of the Father, that like sexuality is for these things, and if you go outside of these or outside of these boundaries, life is going to be chaos. And I think often sort of conservative Catholic culture paints two binaries. It's either perfectly ordered, integrated sexuality with happy families, everybody's conceived in wedlock, families are perfectly together, or it's like all of these ex-gay testimonies are like, I was having sex with like 1,000 people and doing crack all the time and all these things. It's like, yeah, that might explain like why it wasn't a good experience. And I think the thing that I realized since deconstructing is that like it's not an either or option, and that Catholics are just as sexually dysfunctional as, let's say, the ex-gay sort of testimonies, that an integrated sexuality is to care about people, to have healthy decisions that you're making, and then working with your partner. Is this marriage? Is this something else? Yeah. And things are much healthier with an outlet than just shoving in a box. Yeah. The other interesting thing that I found is that like I think about sex and it controls my life less since leaving than while in it, where I think a lot of traditional Catholics are trying to like white knuckle their way to heaven, where you can't act out in any possible way. And that ironically becomes a huge central focus of every Catholic male group, is not committing solo sins. And then when that's an outlet, it's just like, oh, you just go about your life, and not for 3 days like calling everybody at 2 a.m. Like, it's crazy. It controls us in my life now that there's a healthy way to look at it.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. You know, one of the big messages that a lot of Catholic young people get is exactly what you said, which is, you know, if you don't follow these teachings and follow the church, your life is just going to be this like big chaotic mess. And then they give you all these like random stories of one-offs that they experienced in the world, when in reality, and this may be the experience of others as well. My experience was that my internal life was extremely chaotic, or was over-controlled in ways that manifested later as mental health diagnoses. I would just be curious to raise your hand if that resonates with you or was also your experience. Yeah, okay, somewhat. Let's maybe come over to this side of the table, and I want to start with Justin, and then we'll kind of make our way around. Kind of just same question for you.
Yeah, like the idea of integration was nowhere on my radar growing up, and for me it was like, especially working with spiritual directors and like Courage International, it was always like pursuing virtue was the term. So there was never even a possibility of the fact that I was gay. It was, okay, you are straight, that's your identity. We're pursuing authentic masculinity. We're pursuing like wholeness of the whole person. And so then it became, and that's the weird thing. Well, they'll say that, people told me you don't have to overcome your same-sex attractions, but all the language is, well, how do we reduce the desires? How do we get them to go away? If you pray, if you go to mass, if you go to confession, you know, you're confessing those sins. If you're pursuing healthy friendships with men, if you do that enough, then these are going to eventually diminish and go away, was still the assumption there. So there's that tension, because like that's what I was supposed to be doing. But after years and years and years of trying to be virtuous, without acting on anything, nothing had changed. You know, I still fell in love with a guy. All of my efforts of like being straight completely failed. And it was this huge sense of moral failure on one hand, once I got to that point when I was 25. But then on the flip side, like feeling lied to in so many ways. I was promised if I work hard enough, if I pursue my spirituality in the right way, then I'm going to overcome this, you know, I'll be a saint, pick whatever language you want. And then to have it completely fall apart, to realize there's no psychological backing for this. It was this huge betrayal from the church of like, you knew better and you lied to me. Why did you do that?
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you for sharing. I'm going to do another raise hand question, then I'm going to come to you, Max. Yeah. Raise your hand if you tried really hard to do the Catholic thing and then at some point had some kind of big breaking point where you were like, oh, crap, I cannot do this the way I've been doing. Okay, yeah. So maybe let's go to you next, Emma. Talk about, the role that maybe integration, messages around integration played for you when you're young, but also, your experience seemed like it was a little bit different from some of what was raised before. So maybe you should talk a bit about your experience.
100%. So for me, I was raised in a very Polish, Irish, Italian, Chicago Northwest suburb. So a place where Arby's down the street openly advertised for Lent. Not just that they had fish sandwiches, but for Lent. So a place where it homogenized Catholic experience to not understand there were outside options. And very much in the same way used terms like virginity, chastity, personal virtue as kind of these dog whistles to like instigate and talk about like levels of personal and bodily control that they had changed consistently throughout the history of the church. So for me, I grew up attending in middle school the True Beauty Retreat, classic. It's now actually a name that's used by a spirituality direction booklet and series of DVDs for young people about learning chastity. But it was quite an experience it culminated in like carrying a white rose up the center of the altar alone and placing it in a vase on the altar next to a statue of the Virgin Mary. So if the message wasn't clear, it should have been. But it was the same in that my experience for me in understanding integration in the church was definitely from a historical perspective. So the way that I deconstructed was understanding that my experience was not individual. There were others out there who had experienced purity culture, but that historically and presently, purity culture thrives on queerphobia and transphobia. So for me, the idea that I was doing an excellent job, not being attracted to men and having sex with men, was in many ways designed to make me feel better if I was a straight woman. But the erasure of queer women and trans bodies and trans people in these conversations was even more sinister.
Yeah, I really liked what you had to say because it's an experience that I've seen play out many times where there are young Catholics who hear these messages about what it means to be chaste and integrated, and then they think that they're really good at it. They date someone of the opposite sex. They are so respectful. And then they get married, and then they have this crisis because they struggle to have sex with their spouse. They finally have to confront the fact that, oh, actually, I'm not having the sexual life, number one, that was promised to me, even though I did everything right. And also, I'm having to deal with the fact that now I am a different kind of person than what I thought. And the reason why I was able to hide that was because of these messages around chastity. And I've seen couples go through infidelity. I've seen couples go through divorce. And sometimes it makes me angry to think about this is a pathway that people put out in front of me. And I could have ended up really hurting someone through that. Last but not least, Max, so earlier when I raised the question around, messages concerning integration presented to you as a kid, you had a strong reaction. that was negative, but I actually want to start in a slightly different place, which was, when you first heard messages around integration as a kid, as a Catholic, were those messages appealing to you or compelling, and why?
Okay, compelling. That's interesting. So I think that I lived in a structure of Catholicism where I felt like I had to follow all the rules. So I don't know that I would have been drawn to them necessarily versus I was bargaining or trying to understand what's the relationship between me and these rules? Like, where do I fit? And that's really kind of the first stage of my exploration of my gender as a transgender person, because I just was baffled. I was really confused. I read Theology of the Body in detail, and I'm looking, and he's like, women by nature from God, like inherently are feminine in these specific ways. And not only did it not resonate with me, because I was like, something's not matching up here, but also I saw many examples of plenty of cisgender heterosexual people don't fit these like prescriptive roles. So I think for me, the integration piece was really complicated because I knew that Catholicism was very important to me. I enjoyed like the smells and bells, the the rituals, the hymns, participating in music ministry where we find all the gays.
The
But
church would be empty without them.
yes,
And no priests.
true. But it was much more difficult to see myself in something like theology of the body, or just the other messages, or even that idea that Evelyn and Emma both touched on of like being in a modesty talk or being in a talk that's more geared toward heterosexuality and just being like, no, this is not applying to me. So yeah, I struggled a lot. I read a lot. I tried to find a place for me within that world, and I didn't. There wasn't a place for somebody who was experiencing gender dysphoria who was transgender.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you had to say about, my experience as a kid was, my interest or what I would have found compelling wasn't really so relevant as was following the rules, which is kind of the opposite of integration, right? According to Catholic teaching, integration would involve kind of an awakening and a forming and to use like a medieval term, like a quickening of desire, right? So actually, this like rules focus to me means I would be like really hinder your ability to become integrated.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I experienced too. And it's one of the reasons why now it's really important to me to be like a visible transgender Catholic person, because I know that there are plenty of transgender kids who are born into Catholic families similar to me where there's just all these rules. And I want to be a visible example that, hey, actually, like, there are ways of talking about Catholic tradition and Christian tradition, Catholic social teaching, where we are able to integrate these things. There's so many things about, like, Catholicism that are kind of trans. I mean, honestly, like...
I mean, the Central Sacrament has a certain name.
I had like a comment about that. It's just so interesting to hear you talk about that, Max, about reading Theology of the Body or learning about it and have it not sit right with your experience. Yeah. Because when I took a Theology of the Body class in Steubenville, one of the first things we sort of talked about was how John Paul II was so steeped in phenomenology, philosophy, and how, like, philosophers for so long just like would lock themselves in a tower to try to get to pure reason, and they were disconnected from reality. So then John Paul II is trying to get actually, connected to the body, connected to reality. And so if it doesn't ring true, like the truth should ring true in your heart. And if it doesn't, then maybe there's something wrong. And I started to see this huge divide between like, okay, this seems like I guess it resonates with cis straight people because like, yeah, I feel like a woman. I'm attracted to men because I'm a woman. But then as soon as you're not fitting in that box, it doesn't ring true to you. And so then I'm like learning all these stories of queer people who are like, yeah, that does not actually make any sense at all. I don't know what he's talking about. And the church saying like, well, you're just flawed. You're just like broken inside. But you can trust our intuition because it sounds right to me. I'm like, okay. That sounds like coercive of like, you're supposed to be able to trust your intuition, but not you because you're messed up. So you have to listen to me only. So it was ultimately like the stuff that I learned in my Theology of the Body classes that made me like actually learn how to be true to myself. And like, well said, this is actually not fitting.
Absolutely. I just wanted to also clarify that this is a conversation with many of us who are queer and trans Catholics, but in the same way, purity culture and high control Catholicism hurts everyone.
Yes.
So anyone who is listening, especially cis straight people, are hurt by constructs that make them feel they are inherently disordered within the church. So we're grateful to hold this space and also highlight how for us is one experience among many of people who have been personally hurt by theology that tells them that they shouldn't exist or that they're incorrect for how they live.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of these conversations help to lift up other issues in the church as well. It continues to be really funny to me that the most common topic on my Instagram account is women's sexual and reproductive health. The number of conversations that people have asked me to facilitate on NFP, and I'm like, I'm not a medical professional, and I'm a gay man. I'm the last person who should be doing this. But I think there's something about having gone through these experiences and having processed them that allows a lot of connection points. So it's kind of weird now that I'm in this more complicated relationship to Catholicism. I actually feel much more connected to many parts of the church than I did before. Yeah, I'd be curious. Yeah, the not ex-Catholics, for Catholics. I see nodding.
No, I actually completely resonate with that, and it's odd because I was deeply, deeply Catholic. Like I was very deeply moved by so many things within the church and the theology of the church, and also just like the community and the structure that it provided. And so I don't want to make it out to be that like for the first however many years I was intensely Catholic, like I actually wasn't. But I do think that it just makes more sense to me. Everything around integration and the way that like our body like speaks into theology and our relationships with other people, and like honestly a lot of what I learned in my Christian marriage class about like facilitating healthy relationships makes a lot more sense to me in the context of a relationship that actually like works with who I am, and not I tried to date like a lot of men. Like I was a little bit boy crazy because I was like trying to figure out how to make this work. So I think it was also like a little bit shocking to some people when I did come out, because they're like, you're just like trying to date a new boy every 3 seconds. And I'm like, yeah, because I'm like trying to figure out like why they're all not hitting right. And yeah, but like I just think there was a lot about the teaching that resonated more with me. Not that I did not have things about the church that spoke to me before, but specifically around like theology as it relates to our body, especially now that that's become such a pinnacle of what the American conservative Catholic Church would like to focus all of its energy on. That's the thing that's wild to me, is like when I was leaving and I was talking to a friend that I was going to meet up with you for coffee, and she was like, I feel like the way you're going about it just like makes more sense, because like, I mean, at least you're being intellectually honest, like you're gay and so you're not Catholic, but like why is he trying to be gay and so Catholic? Like it's just like really confusing. And like, oh my gosh, I don't remember where I was going with that.
But I'm like nodding along as you're saying that, because I also feel more connected to different parts of the church than I did when I was Catholic, because the Catholic that I was in was such a narrow sliver. You can only be Catholic in this way.
Yeah.
We only listen to these Catholics. We only read these books. We only like go to these types of churches.
Mumford and Sons.
Yeah.
No, keep going, Veronica.
I did recently go to a Mumford and Sons concert, so I still love Mumford, but it actually was kind of a difficult experience for me, actually, because I'd forgot just how many of them were so like religious coded and had meant something very different to me when I was younger. But yeah, I do feel more connected to the church in different ways, and I think the work that all of us do is really important, because if I had more representation growing up, that there's all different types of ways to be Catholic, I wouldn't have felt so trapped when I was changing and felt like I couldn't be Catholic anymore. And that was just a personal thing for me. But I also agree that it's so important for people to be able to look at, adult transgender Catholics or queer Catholics, or I, go to church sometimes, but I still identify as Catholic, and not the culture of like, those aren't real Catholics. Like, you're just a cafeteria Catholic. I want to move away from that to a more universal.
Sorry, can I just finish the thought I had before, because I like remember where I was going with it now. Sorry. Yeah. I was saying, because the American Catholic Church has decided to stake so much of itself and so much of what it means to be a Catholic on like these like specific culture war issues, that was where I was going with my point about like, I don't get why Chris is doing that. And I'm like, I mean, like, you just have no problem with the amount of people who imperfectly do so many other things. But then I don't even like that language, because I don't think like we're imperfectly doing anything. But it's just like, you won't plant the flag of who is and is not a Catholic is not in the people who own wildly successful businesses in the Catholic world and like don't pay their employees a living wage, despite what the Catechism says. Like, that's not where you're drawing the line. It's like how conservative you can be on like 3 talking points is whether you can be Catholic or not. Yeah. And I just think if that's where the American church wants to continue to like stake so much of what the Catholic identity means, if they want to keep doing that, it's going to result in queer people within the church being hyper aware of the way they don't fit into that. So
yeah, just before I come to Kate, I just wanted to drop in, one of my favorite quotes is, something that Mary Carr, she's a Catholic memoirist and poet, she comes back to again and again. She says, everyone's a cafeteria everything, and that kind of resonates with me. Go ahead, Kate.
I was going to say, I was just having a conversation with Catholics on marriage, and they were wanting like this perfect definition of marriage. They were wanting like every possible question answered. And then their sort of rejoinder to that was like, so we need a definition. And then they provided a definition. It's like, I think marriage and sexuality and children and gender and all of these things are complex. And what I often find in these conversations is somebody sees complexity out there and then they just reflexively grasp for something, a solid answer. And a solid answer in a world of complexity feels compelling because you're like, every situation could be answered by this. And I think the sort of conservative Catholic Jesus is supposed to work for everybody perfectly all the time. And the one thing that I found since leaving is that a deconstructed sexuality is much more diverse. It is much more in line with finding truth, goodness, and beauty out there, where it's not like you go from the church, which teaches sort of prudence and chastity and all of these things, and then you just invert. I think even at this table, we all have different thoughts and experiences around sexuality, that it's not either or, that I think what oftentimes conservatives get shown on the news as a caricature of a particular group is pure chaos. And then you meet people in real life and they're normal. They're people with stories. They're not the people that you've been told to see. And there is complexity. And I think it's just that when you hit these conversations, I mean, for somebody listening, it's like, wow, there's so many questions. Like, yeah. And so sit with those emotions instead of just going, that makes me uncomfortable. Get a definition together. Because a definition is not a good definition or one that works for all people.
Yeah, I often think, sexuality and integration is something that unfolds and develops. That was really helpful for me, especially as I was studying kind of virtue ethics and getting into really medieval theology. Integration is not, a checklist where you check everything off and you just arrive. I actually think it's much more kind of like what we've been doing this weekend, which is just kind of an unfolding of something, an increased openness and honesty and connection. And I think it's really hard to experience that when you're in a hyper rules-based culture that doesn't let you even speak honestly about what you're experiencing. Yeah, I saw the mic move. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, no.
I was also going to say, as Cade said, and just as you, Evelyn, said, an important takeaway from our weekend also was that in our conversations, the idea that necessarily religion has to be something claimed by far-right forces. Many queer and trans people connect with spirituality in different ways, but in the same way that many of us here have complex relationships with religion, but it doesn't mean that we don't seek spiritual meaning or seek religious frameworks and rituals to our lives. We just seek them differently and have deconstructed. Brian McNaught, in his new book, A Prince of a Boy, has a really beautiful quote of, he explains that as someone who had to deconstruct his faith from an early age as a gay Catholic, he has a much deeper relationship with his faith than most people who don't have to think critically about what it means to claim that definition or to claim that identity. And in the same way as you were saying, connecting back to what you were saying earlier, I think, Veronica, as you say, the difficult part is so many people are disconnected from queer and trans Catholic histories. So much of the work that I love that Max and I get to do is connect to in medieval hagiographies. There's such a rich history of non-conforming saints, but stories that are often not told to us or explained.
And even like, what is it? Is it Father Mike Schmitz who says that? I can't wait for the day for there to be a canonized same-sex attracted like saint, like a Catholic who experienced same-sex attraction to be canonized a saint. And like watching that now.
And you've said it and you've brought this up multiple times this weekend. And,
yeah.
And I never want to step in because like I am a historian. And
please.
No. And I love the work that I get to do. But it's because like there were. And just by definition, statistically there were. But we know from intense writings that relationships, same-sex relationships, but also people that today we might identify as trans, non-binary, gender expansive, were not only key members of the church, they were leaders in our own construction of spirituality today. They're the reason we have theologies that we do.
Yeah, one of the things that I really find interesting, whatever. One of the things that I find really interesting is the ways in which kind of the Catholic talking points will do a lot to really erase Catholic history, erase Catholic saints, erase Catholic theology. So, when people say, Chris, he can't be gay and Catholic and doing all of these things. I'm just kind of like, no, like theologically, that is just not accurate. So actually, I think I agree with the church and maybe you don't when it comes to sacraments. Or I think about when people talk about, you can't make bodily changes, electively, whatever. I'm just kind of like, well, like, what about like St. Lucy? We like kind of love the eyeballs on the plate. Like, is it not okay that she like plucked those things out?
Who's the one who like actually cut their breasts off?
Oh yeah.
So there's a lot of, I think that if we maybe were more open to people's actual experiences today, then it might also open up church history and the lives of the saints in unexpected ways. Yeah.
Well, I know like another topic of conversation has along this line is how revolutionary the saints have been and how they were rejected and ostracized by the church. And now we're like, oh my gosh, look at Catherine of Siena or Teresa of Avila. And like, they're so amazing when like they were, on the absolute fringes being pushed out, told they're crazy, these women being told they need to get in line. And I think that we, like, because of their insolence, because of how they pushed against the norms of the day, the church moved forward. And now that we're kind of in the midst of that, like we're in some senses on that same periphery of like, hey, there's something that needs to be addressed here. There's something that's going wrong. And rather than the church engaging with this, it's kind of continuing with its old habits of like, we're digging our heels in. And then unfortunately for us in 150 years, there's going to be a synod and then something's going to shift, We don't know what that is, but we know that the tension we're experiencing now is going to be resolved in some level in the future. And that tension doesn't get resolved unless there's people bringing up the problems in the here now.
Thanks for listening. This was just a part of a conversation that we've dropped you all into. As you might have gathered from our conversation, this is just part of a weekend that we had all spent together, working out questions and problems related to the church and how we relate to it today. So this is our opportunity to just clue you into some of those conversations. There's obviously much more to come. In the next part, we're going to talk a little bit more about working through trauma, experiences of harm, and fears about what our lives could look like if we get things wrong in the church. I'm very excited to share that with you, and that will be coming out very soon.